So once the curve was disproven and we saw all of the evidence for both curve and missing curve, the motion of Earth was the last thing that really needed to be disproven, because we have things like Foucault's pendulum that tell us the Earth is rotating. And I was stumped by this for a few hours until I looked into it and found out there's some really cool things that I had never even heard of and that the mainstream is unaware of. And it has to do with this pendulum here that has been set up in a lot of science museums and swings at intervals as the Earth allegedly rotates beneath it. And I was told this has nothing to do with anything above. It has everything to do with the Earth rotating below. Well, my first thought when looking into this proof was that if it is real, they should be able to put it at the North Pole and the South Pole and prove once and for all that the Earth is spinning, because it would spin one way underneath them at the North Pole and a different way at the South Pole, and it would rotate within a 24-hour period. If that happens, there's your proof. So let's look at that proof and read what happened when they went to the South Pole. Researchers did this, and on their first attempt, they say, this is their words, with the pendulum, it showed the Earth spinning backward from what was expected. We did not notice this at first because we're all from the Northern Hemisphere and are accustomed to the Earth spinning in an anti-clockwise direction. We then realized that from our frame of reference, the Earth should be spinning clockwise, so we had to modify the pendulum like a carnival trick. They had to modify it, and it says our second attempt showed the Earth rotating in the proper direction after they modified it, but at an angular velocity twice what is expected, i.e. 12-hour days instead of 24. And he said, this is something I read in the article but didn't paste, he said they thought they had uncovered some conspiracy. Okay. So he actually did, but the guy here, Mike Town, he got very adept at dropping the bob so that it arced in a plane. So in other words, Mike was the one who perfected the carnival trick, but that's not where it goes south for them entirely. There was another person who was experimenting with these, and he was doing this during an eclipse. And there's an effect named after what happens called the Elias effect. And this effect refers to an alleged anomalous behavior of pendulums or gravimeters, which is observed during a solar eclipse. The effect was first reported as an anomalous precession of the plane of oscillation of a Foucault pendulum during the solar eclipse of June 30th, 1954. And this is someone who went on to win a Nobel Prize in economics, a pretty smart guy. And you would think that after this, people would start wondering, why are the luminaries above that are so far away impacting a pendulum? And how great of a degree were they affected? I was surprised to find that the change was significant. It was 13.5 degrees per 14 minutes compared to its usual 15 degrees per hour. And this is particularly surprising because the experiment was conducted indoors, away from the sunlight. So there should have been no way the eclipse could affect it. But in 1959, when there was another eclipse, he saw exactly the same effect. And he wasn't the only one. More have confirmed the results from several different locations, including an underground laboratory. And during this year's eclipse, in August, of course this is an old article, so it was talking about the one I think in 2017, NASA and other groups attempted a range of experiments to finally confirm or deny the result. Their conclusions are still awaited. Yes, we are waiting because we know what the conclusion is. What's above us, the great expanse, the firmament that we have seen, is causing these anomalies. You have the largest, most magnificent expanse above us that was created on the second day of creation, and it's no surprise that it is what is causing some of these things to happen that we believed were due to a rotating ball flying around the sun. But when you find out how a lot of these things work in the first place, it gets even more strange, as these things, especially the ones that are set up in the science museums around the world, are all designed and manufactured by one company. And listen to what they have to say. This is from a phone conversation that someone had with one of the makers of these pendulums, and this guy knows the history behind them and their design and how they work. I found this interesting when I looked into it, and the young man who did the interview asked some really good questions and received some interesting answers. So let's go ahead and take a look at what he has to say. It's quite surprising.
I want to do a video on something called a Foucault pendulum. You also hear it called a Foucault pendulum. These are pendulums that are supposed to demonstrate the spin of the Earth, but not everyone realizes that they actually have a magnetic drive plugged into electricity that keeps them moving. So I guess the magnet drive system is what I guess keeps it spinning in the proper pattern or whatever.
Actually, no, the pattern is by the Earth's rotation.
Okay.
The magnetic drive keeps it swinging back and forth the full distance.
Gotcha.
So there's actually up in the ceiling there's a 3-foot high cone that has a circular magnet. The cable swings in the center of that. Hanging on the cable is a steel donut.
Okay.
So when the cable hits dead center, it breaks the photo beam, turning on the electric magnet. Then it pulls, it draws the steel donut on the cable towards the ring. It times out, and then it goes over again. So it only turns on and off for a couple of seconds. So what that does, it keeps the pendulum swinging. When you have that much weight swinging back and forth in motion, it'll stay in the same plane in space. Okay. But the world rotates underneath it. That's a physics demonstration.
So I'm assuming maybe the first one didn't have, the little magnetic drive deal on it.
Actually it did. They have the magnetic ring. They just the amplifier used to use tubes, and instead of photo beams, they used to actually have a magnet on the center of the ground. And then they had a magnetic ring up on the tower. So then they ran a wire from the pit all the way up to the ceiling. So once they put a magnet on the tip of the ball. So when the two magnets crossed over each other, it sent a signal to turn on the power. But it was very crude and wasn't quite accurate, and they had to be adjusted quite often. It wasn't quite accurate, and they had to be adjusted quite often.
Sure.
And it wasn't until the 70s and 80s when they came up with the logic module and the solid-state relays and stuff that we got more accurate.
So here's one last video on how ring magnets have multiple poles on them. So I don't see how it's possible that when the magnet is activated in order to keep the pendulum in perpetual motion, how those other poles don't affect the swing of the pendulum. So it's my opinion that it's these multiple poles that cause the oscillating pattern and not the spin of the Earth, but I'll let you make your own decision.
It wasn't quite accurate, and they had to be adjusted quite often. And it wasn't until the 70s and 80s when they came up with the logic module, solid-state relays and stuff that we got more accurate.
So like the man said in the interview, they had to modify them to make them more accurate. Things that are already aligned with circular magnets and electronic components to keep them in motion have to have modifications to be accurate, as if the largest sphere rotating beneath it wouldn't cause the same result unless you modify it.